Good evening, everyone.
God, Raf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. It looks like we're going to Dalid. Okay, let's try that. So it says in the two, tafshil, right? So when they make a cooked dish out of the grains, then the blessing is mezonot. Aval im machalotam ba'ain, but if he ate them as is, lo shana chayin lo shana b'ushalim. Doesn't matter whether it's raw or cooked. Right? So what's the blessing on that? Bar piyadama. And says Bet Yosef regarding that, it's over there and also in Brachot Lam Zayin Mudalef. Bebraita, it says in Braita there, Koses etachita, person who chews some wheat. In other words, he's eating it raw. Mevarech alea bore priyadama. So the blessing is bore priyadama. V'nireh medivrei Tosfot, it seems from Tosfot, and also Rosh and the Rosh, the Ben Chayin, Ben Shalkinhu, that whether it's raw or cooked, and it's still in the original form. That means that it wasn't crushed up or something like that, mashed. Right? So he says we bless on that borei priyadama. V'gam Rabbeinu Yonah katav sham gabe chavitz ktera. So Rabbeinu also says, right, regarding a certain cooked dish, v'chen daisa. Right, so these are types of cooked dishes with the wheat and like porridge and stuff like that. So he says we see from this that you shouldn't bless on the daisa boremin mezonot ela כשנכתשו החיטים ונדבקו ונעשו דומיה חביץ קדרה. So it's the what's the indicator here that tells you whether to bless mezonot or to bless hadama? So if the grains are like squashed and mashed up, so it look like a big mash, like so there the blessing is mezonot. But if they're like whole grains, so there it's not going to be mezonot. It's going to be hadamah. This is the criterion that we go by. So great. Then he goes on to say, King Katab Rambam. Rambam also says this. Achal dagan shaluk. So he says if he ate grains which were cooked, kemoshu mevarech as is, right? So meaning what? That it has the same shape, as raw wheat, basically. Mevarech lefanat borei pi adama. So it's going to be borei pi adama. V'achar kach katav, and then afterwards he says, v'chen dagan shechalku או קדשו, בשתו בקדרה, כגון חליפות וגרש כרמל, וכיוצא בזה, מברך בורא מן מזונות. But he says, once you break them up, the kernels of wheat, and you mash them up kind of whatever, so then it becomes mezonot. So once it's broken up and mashed or whatever, something like that, the blessing becomes mezonot. But as long as the kernels are whole, it's still going to be hadamah. Okay, that's a very important halakha because this comes up all the time, all kinds of foods. Um, okay, great. Kataba Kolbo, right? It says Kolbo, Bashem Ri, name of the Ri, Shakoses Seorim Chayin. What about if he, right, eats barley, right? Raw barley. It's like a snack food, for some people. In the old days, that's the way it was. I don't know. So, וכן על השיבולים של שעורים. And also, right, the kernels of barley, shecharchan, which were singed, like ba'ur, they were like roasted, in the oven or whatever, on the fire. K'derech she'osim kaliot, like they make, these snack foods. Mevorech she'akol. So the blessing is going to be she'akol for that. It says she'akol. So why is that? So he says because it's hard food. It's not the way to eat that stuff. It's too hard. So it's something like, inferior. That's what he's trying to say, right? So therefore, it's not really something that you're going to bless Bore Piyadama. You're going to make shakol because of the inferiority of it. Okay, what else we got? So it says, שהכל לפי שהוא מאכל קשה, ואין דרך לאכלו עד כאן לשונו, ואין כאן דת רבנו, but he says the Tur doesn't agree with this, that this is going to be shakol. אלא כל החמשת המינים, so the Tur holds that all the 5 species of grain, shavin לעניין זה, they're all equal, right? So in other words, they're all going to be the same blessing, which means that they're all going to be hadama. As long as they're whole grains, as we said. Rabbeinu David Avudrahem. So this rabbi katav shakoses orez. What about if you do that with rice? What's the blessing, right? You eat it as a snack food, or dochan, right, or millet. So then the blessing is going to be hadama, right? So that's what we make for rice, which is not boiled. The blessing is hadama. So it's the same as wheat and barley, right? Regarding the first blessing. V'koses et haseorim. So if he choose right eats the barley, eno mevorech aleim klum. So he says right, you don't bless nothing on barley. Why is that? So he says it's animal fodder. Oh my God, that's what he says. You don't bless on animal fodder. Well, there you go. Okay. So again, right, we see there's different approaches over here with barley. Right, the one says shakol, one says hadama, and one says nothing at all. Okay, so we'll see what's halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. Ad kan So he says that's the end of that, and then um, the ends at tam klal. So he says, right, this is not good reasoning. So he says, why is that? So Bit Yosef comments on this, right, and said, this is no good. Why? Because since you're getting some, right, you're getting some pleasure from eating it, right, some benefit, whatever. In other words, you're tasting something there, what you like. Otherwise, you won't eat that stuff. So if that's the case, it also gives you nutrition. Barley is full of starch. Right? ואין זה טעם כלל, דכיוון שנהנה אף על פי שהוא מאכל בהמה, למה לא יברך עליו? So he says, why shouldn't he bless on it, if that's the case, right? Even though it's animal fodder, but if you're eating it and enjoying it, so you gotta bless. Simple as that. Good point. Okay. So then it goes on. בברכה האחרונה כתב בהג בורא נפשות רבות. So he says, what about the final blessing? So it's going to be bor nefashot, right? For what? We're talking about the whole grains. וכן כתב רמב"ם, although Rambam says also this, Tosfot. So he says, but Tosfot has a doubt regarding this. If you're going to do על המחיה on this. ויסיים על האדמה, and then, right, so you're going to say on the hadama, on the ground, al pri adama, on the fruitful ground, משום דלא השכחן ברכת על המחיה ועל הכלכלה, אלא אחד מברך. He says, we don't find, he says, the blessing of al המחיה, unless he blesses בריש הקודם אכילת בורא מיני המזונות, unless he blesses before בורא מזונות. רבנו תם הגיע במחזור שלו, so he says, רבנו תם, in his prayer book, he says Adama, Al Pri Adama, also same thing, right? In other words, the same thing as what we find in Tosfot. Okay. וחזר בו, then anybody says retracted. דלא השכחן משום מקום הם hach bracha. So he says, we don't find any blessing like this. In other words, it's a newfangled thing, came from the sky all of a sudden. We don't find in the Talmud this kind of language for blessings. So therefore, you just can't make it up from the sky. Okay, so that's a good thing to remember, Don't make up new things. Okay. So, all right, there you go. So, what else we got here? But then he says, right, in the end, right, Tosfot concludes here, ובסוף העלו, נכון להחמיר שלא לאכול כליות או חיטים של ירקות, אלא בתוך הסעודה. So he says, the proper thing to do is to eat them in the meal. This way you won't have a doubt, rather, regarding the final blessing, what to make. Right. The truth is, we're not really so particular about these things, like Tosfot. We're pretty much, right, we have clarity there when it comes to this halacha. Shaz birkat hamazon patartan. So then the birkat hamazon will absolve them. He says, Im lo nitma'achu yafeh. Unless they became, as we said, right, got mashed up and smashed up. They look like porridge already. Something like that. So there they have it called kimudai. So then it's porridge. Then it's going to be mezonot. That's something else. Ken katu sham Rosh also said, Rashba also. Zal v'chachin aktina. So that's how halacha, he says. וכתב רשב"א, תסרא לעניין ברכה האחרונה כחיטה. So Rashba says, right, that when it comes to barley, you have the same after blessing as wheat. So, right, if the after blessing is going to be bor nefashot because you made hadama on the whole kernels, so then it's going to be bor nefashot also for barley. But if it's going to be ala mechia because you ate it, mashed up in the right like porridge, so the same thing also will apply to something you did like that with the barley. Same idea. Okay, so this is an important halacha. This one, a lot of important stuff, concepts here going on. So let's see Shulchan Aruch. So say Shulchan Aruch like this. Achal dagan chai o asui kaliyot shaluk. If he ate, right, grains, and whether it's raw or cooked or roasted, right, and like it's like a full grain, it's not cut up, it's not smashed up. So it's going to be bore piyadama for whole grains. Afterwards, it's going to be bore nefashot. So it says here the Rama, the Hadar mevarech lefanav bore piyadama. So this is that which we bless before it, bore piyadama. I know meochel chitin. He says if you're eating wheat or something similar to that, because we're fitting to eat like that. But if he eats right barley, as we said, and shtamim, which is whole grains, even if they're roasted in fire, so he says they're not really fitting to eat. It's not fitting for human consumption. So he says, therefore, the blessing is shehakol. All right, that's very interesting. Interesting, that in America, the Ashkenazim over here, their custom is to put barley into the cholent. Yeah, so actually they do eat it. The Ashkenazim are very much into that stuff. It absorbs the flavor of the meat, right? And it's pretty good. Not bad at all. But in Israel, right, which is more like a Sephardi culture, so there, what they do is they put wheat in the cholent. They don't put barley. And the truth is, the wheat is better quality, just like we're saying over here. So I think that's the superior approach, with all due respect to the Americans. It's not only the Americans, the Ashkenazim. That's our custom. They put barley into the cholent. I've seen this 1,000 times. Okay, so all right. Anyway, so the Rama anyway says right that it's shakol. So according to that, right, if you eat cholent, just take the barley and eat that, you make shakol on that, which is very very unusual. Okay. So, right, we saw that there are those who paskin like that, in the Beit Yosef, the shakol. Uh, but the more common approach seems to be that it's really adama, because after all, that's what it is, I mean, what can I tell you? Okay, but anyway, continues Shulchan Aruch over here. והתוספות נסתפקו אם יברך לאחריו ברכה מן שלוש. So he says the Tosfot, as we saw in the Beit Yosef, right? They have a doubt whether you're going to bless ala michya on this. What does that mean? On cooked wheat, right? Things like this. לכן כתוב שנכון שלא לאכלו. So he says, therefore, right, it's proper to eat it only within the seudah. This way, you won't have any questions about that. You'll cover all bases, because then the Birkat Hamazon will absolve it. So, okay, right. The truth is, that. So I'm gonna, just review this for a second, because we have to look at the structure here to see what is the halacha really. So the first thing said in the Shulchan Aruch here was that, as we said, right, if the grains are whole grains, it's going to be borei piyadama, whether it's raw or cooked. And afterwards, borei nefashot, right? So there you go, right? So then he brought the opinion of Tosfot, right? Who has a different way of looking at this. So the question is, what's going to be the halacha here? So according to the rules of Shulchan Aruch, it's going to be like the first opinion because it's like stam v'yesh, Tosfot is like a yesh omrim. So therefore, halacha like the first opinion. So what does that mean? We're going to do right bor nefashot for this kind of stuff. Makes sense. And the Tosfot is like a minority opinion. Okay, you don't have to be that so stringent like that. So that's that. But we did see right that the Ramah paskins here that for barley you're going to make shakol. All right, interesting. But it seems like in the Bit Yosef he was more leaning towards making hadama on this. Just gonna look at it one more time just to make sure. Right. So the way he structures it in Bit Yosef, right? This is, by the way, good right, halachic, right? How to make halachic decisions, right? Render decisions in halacha, how to analyze halacha. So what do we see here, right? The Bet Yosef brings, first of all, the opinion, which is that it's shakol, as we said, because barley is inferior. But then he says, right, but Rabbeinu, he says the Tur doesn't hold this way. So that's how he concludes it. Um, so that implies sort of that he's more like leaning towards the Tur, who says that it's going to be Borei Piyadama. So I would venture to say that according to Bet Yosef, barley is going to be Borei Piyadama, not Shakol. But according to Rama, you see that he paskins that it's Shakol. So right there you go, right? You have a machloket Ashkenazim and Sfarim, I guess. That's what it is. Okay, but anyway, so I guess we'll move on to hay. So it says over here, kemach shel chitin b'tchila shakol. Oh, so now the question is like this, right? What do you bless on flour? Did you ever see about somebody who likes to eat flour? Um, never came across that.
Dangerous.
I'm sorry.
Dangerous.
Why? Why is that?
There's like bacteria that you can get sick.
There's bacteria in the flour?
Yeah, you're not supposed to eat uncooked flour.
Oh, that's very interesting. Wow. Well, how would that be? Why would that be dangerous?
You would get food poisoning
Right, but why? Why would that happen?
because of microbes that are on the uncooked flour.
Oh, get there.
I'm sorry?
How do they get there, microbes?
They're in the soil when you grow it.
Ah, I see. Oh, okay. Uh-huh, uh-huh. But that would also mean you can't have wheat either, right? According to that, like raw wheat. That's the same thing, right?
Yeah, so like this is why it's not a good idea to eat raw flour, and it's not a good idea to one of the reasons why you wouldn't eat raw dough, even if it doesn't have eggs in it, you can still get food poisoning.
Can I ask you a question? Like, what is it? Who says this? The doctors say this?
Microbiologists.
Really? Oh, okay. All right. That's very interesting. I didn't know that. Not that I'm a big fan of eating, flour, right? Whatever. Nobody does that today. But anyway, just interesting to know. Anyway, so if you did have right flour, what would be the blessing? So it will be shakol, he says, right? Why? Because it's inferior, It's not something really, It's not a big delicacy. Let's put it this way. Yeah. And in the end, it will be born nefashot. So okay, there that's what it is. Lo mibaya im nitchan dak dak. So it says, I don't need to tell you if it was already ground up very thin. I guess even if it wasn't ground up very thin. Okay, that's very interesting. So let's see Bet Yosef. What does he say about that? So it says Beresh Perek Kitzat Mibrachim. It says right in this also in Brachot Lamed Amud Aleph. Kimcha dechite Rav Yehuda Amar Bor Piyadama. So what's the blessing on flour, right? In the Gemara it asks. So Rabbi Yehuda says Bor Piyadama. Rav Nachman Amar Shakol. Rav Nachman says Shakol. Pasaka Rif. So the Rif Paskins Rav Nachman. Pasnak Rav Nachman. Mishum de lo aragile inche lisfuye kimcha. So he says because people are not, accustomed to eat that, right? Like something like that, right? So in other words, it's some kind of inferior thing there, who wants to eat flour, right? Umashma desvira de meire bekimach anitchan dak. So he says that implies his words that we're talking about flour which was like really finely ground, She'osim mimenu patz, we make bread from that. Pasak Rambam Perk Gimel. Rambam also says this in the Rosh. Katav nired lo aire bekimach nitchan. So the Rosh says that we're not talking about fine flour, finely ground flour. Dak she'osim mimenu pad that we make bread. Then rawi levarech ala borei pri adama. So he says it's not proper to bless on that borei pri adama, but not dame lekoses and chita, and it's not the same thing as eating raw wheat, the ores or rice. The hanhu ro'in lechol b'zeh anyan. So he says because those are fitting to eat. Aval kemach lo mitachel klal, but he says like flour is not edible. Okay. All right, there you go. So ela ayre v'kemach shelo nitchan. So therefore it says it must be talking about something else. So what does that mean? We're talking about flour which is like not finely ground, Um, maybe like what we call, right, in America, groats, something like that, right? Am I right? Okay. So anyway, there's tam chitim. So there's still some like taste of wheat there. It's not like total powder, But I will like so you can eat like that. You can eat something like that. People eat groats. And I mean, I feel bekemach shenitchan the gamre. So this also could be that even if the flour is like totally ground up, ela shasui mechitim shel kaliot. But he says, you know what? It's made out of roasted wheat, which has a different kind of property, right, to it, a different taste to it. Ve'oto kemach rawi lachila. So he says that is edible, roasted wheat. You grind it up into flour. וכתב הריב סדר ריף, ומסתבר קרב נחמן, so he says we pass like Rav Nachman, דלה רגילה אין של ספויה קמחה. Why? Because people don't they don't eat that stuff, right? Flour. ויש אומרים מדכמה לרבה, so some say, right, that since Rabbi told Rav Nachman, לא תפלוג עליה, the Rav Yehuda says, don't argue on Rabbi Yehuda, he says. Why? The Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Kai mekevate. So it says because Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan hold like him. Oh boy, gotta watch out. Amar de ilchata kerav Yuda. So we see in the halacha like Rabbi Yuda. Afagav de Rav Nachman dachele misvara. Even though the Rav Nachman deflects this, right? So he says, Rava lo kibel sivarato, but Rava didn't accept his reasoning. וגם רב נחמן גופה לא אמר שהכל נהיה בדברו. So this is also Rav Nachman himself didn't say שהכל מטעם שאין דרך בני אדם לאכלו, because of the reason that people don't eat that stuff. דאם כן הווה ממר, because otherwise you should have said מדם וכולי, right, etc., 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 etc. והיח פסק רב נחמן, how did he pass like Rav Nachman? He says, מטעמה דאי הוא גופה לטלה, that in something where he himself doesn't hold by that. So it says it's possible that the riff that passed like Rav Nachman, because it's not the way to eat that stuff. He holds that, there was a machloket regarding flour, which is not from, as we said, right, roasted grains. שנטחן דק, and it was ground up very fine. וחושש סברתו מעצמו, so he says, לפי שסברתו שדבר פשוט הוא. So he says, he entertains the thought that that's correct, that approach. So he says because it's something really, clear cut. She'en rawi le'achlo. So what does that mean? That it's not really, fitting to eat flour. Okay. לפי זה, בקמח של כליות. So he says, according to this, the flour, which is made out of roasted wheat, there the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So he says, this is a machloket. Since it's a machloket, so he says, the proper thing to do is to make shekol on it, right? It's because when there's a machloket, right? We jump into shekol, the shekol mode. That's what we do. So therefore, right, bottom line, a person who eats flour should bless shehakol. Okay, that's it. So, but the question is, what about the roasted ones, right? Is that the same as well? So let's see Shulchan Aruch. Maybe he'll set us straight over here. So says Shulchan Aruch, kemach afilu shel chitim, the flour, right? Even if it's wheat flour, mevarech alav shehakol. The blessing is shehakol. Afterwards, בורא נפשות. לא שנה תטחן דק, לא שנה תטחן קצת, יש בו טעם חיטים, לא שנה קמח של כליות. So it says they're all the same, right? Whether it's finely ground, not finely ground, groats, whatever, right? Or you have the roasted one, it's all the same. The blessing is shehakol. Okay, there you go. Clear as day and night. What can I tell you? Okay, let's try another one. We got time. Where we go? Great. So it says in Vav, שתיתה והוא תבשיר מקמח של כליות. So now, right, we have another variation on this, which is you take the, as we said, right, the flour, which comes from roasted wheat, and they make some kind of a dish out of that. So the question is, what is the blessing for that? I'll look in the Torah, see what he says there. Mhm. Right, so it says the tour over here. והוא תבשיל מקמח של כליות עבה שעומד לאכילה. So it says like a thick kind of a dish, thick. Right, בתחילה, so it says what's going to be the blessing for that? beginning בורא מן המזונות, יגדו מזונות. בסוף ברכה אחת מן השלוש. עניין ידעו על המחיה. Okay, that's if it's thick. What about if it's like more like, diluted, right? Thin, whatever you want to call it, right? Watered down. So that shahi the shtiya. So he said that's really it's like a drink, it's more like a shake there. You drink it, right? So what do you do with that? Lefanav shakol, before you bless shakol, and afterwards you do burn nefashot. Interesting. Okay, that's what the Torah says. Let's go back to Bet Yosef here. So it says that Bet Yosef, it says in Gemara, right? Where is that? Lamed Chet Amud Aleph, and also in Brachot. Shetita, Rav Amar Shakol. And Rav says it's Shakol, the blessing on that. Shmuel Amar Borei Nefesh Mezonot. Right? Shmuel says Mezonot. Amar Rav Chazda, Belo Plige, so he says they're not really arguing here. They're talking about two different things. Ha Be'aveh, right? We're not talking about a thick one, which is like a porridge, looks like a porridge or something. Right? Ha bracha ava achila avdela. So that's for food, right? For eating. Raka lirfua kavdela. But he says the soft one, which is more like a liquid kind of thing. He says that's for healing that they drink that. Rashi explains shetita machal asui b'kemach kaliot. So Rashi explains, right, what is this stuff? So he says it's a dish which is made out of flour of roasted wheat. It was roasted in the oven. So he says at that point the ears of grain are still soft. Not soft, I'm sorry, moist. Right? So the thick one, as we said, goes for eating. So therefore, right, it's mezonot. As we said, says coming to teach you the lo nema kivan de ikara lefua la livrich ale. Right, coming to teach you that don't say, since the main element there is for healing, so you shouldn't bless it all. Maybe comes to tell you no, not true. Gotta do shakol on it. So why you have to bless? So he says the reason is because you're getting some benefit from it, some pleasure right there, some enjoyment from it. You have to bless that. But he says nevertheless you should do shakol. On the thin one, right? On the liquidy one. Kevan she'eno asui lisod, because it's not really coming to satiate you. Oh, okay. Kim lishtot, right? It's a drink basically. Gavna pasak bahag. So regarding this, right? Bahag says, so he says halacha is like this, right? If it's thick, as we said, right? Mevarech borei min mezonot. It's going to be mezonot. Kelishta, but if it's like diluted, watered down, mevarech shakol. It's going to be shakol. Aha. So you see from here, right, that if you have like some kind of a drink, which has some flour in there, some whatever, something like that. So it's going to be shakol. You're not going to make mezonot on that stuff. Okay, so then he says, says even though it's made for healing, but since he enjoys it, he has to bless anyway. Okay, so let's move on. So he says, Katab Rabbeinu Yonah, says this rabbi, Umay de'aminan rakat de avdela. So he says the soft one, right? Since it's made for healing, he says, Evarech shakol, do shakol, same thing, right? Lo kamar mipnei sheno ochel ota le'ana. He said that because he's not doing it for pleasure, ela refuah, for healing. Shevarech shakol, so therefore do shakol. The badai mipnei sheochel adavar refuah. So he says because he's eating it for healing, eno gorea birkato, doesn't make it doesn't prevent blessing on it. El achi kamar, rather it means to say im hayta raka kemo shederech la'asotar refuah. He's trying to say, right, that if it was thin, as we said, watered down, like to make it for healing, even though he's drinking it for right enjoyment, he's going to be blessed shakol on that. Aha. Okay, great. Sounds good. A little bit more. So, Rambam says, Per Gimel, Kimach shel echad mechameshet haminim, right? The flour, which comes from one of the five species, as we said, sheshalku ve'arvu b'mayim. So what did he do with that? Right, he boiled it and he mixed it with water, or b'shar mishkim, or some other liquid. Im haya aveh, if it was thick, kedei sheyeh rawi la'achila, that it's like edible kind of, le'la'aso, or to chew it. Mevarech alav b'tchila borei minei mezonot. You're gonna bless mezonot on that. ובסוף עד המחיה, and in the end על המחיה. ואם היה רך, but it's as if it was soft, כדי שיהיה ראוי לשתייה, that's like drinkable, מברך עליו בתחילה ובשקול, then you're gonna bless שקול, ובסוף בורא נפשות רבות. In the end you're gonna bless בורא נפשות. Okay, very clear. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch here. Let's see what we got. The Shulchan Aruch, קמח של אחד מחמשת מיני דגן. As we said, right, you have flour coming from one of the five species of grain. Sheshalko, it was roasted, right? It doesn't really say roasted; it says it was cooked. The ervu b'mayim, and then he mixed it with water. Okay. Oh, b'shar mashkin, or some other fluid, some other liquid. Im haya abe kedei sheyeh raui la'achila. If it was thick enough, that it's edible, like some kind of a porridge or something, some kind of a cereal, hot cereal, God knows what. Right? Then, uh, or to chew it. Mevarech borei b'nei mezonot. It's going to be mezonot. If it's thick, as we said, right? Ve'acharav al mechia, and afterwards it's going to be al mechia. Ve'im haya rach, but if it's watered down, thin, right? It's like a drink or something, or shake, right? Rak kedei sheyeh raui l'shtiyah. It's drinkable. Mevarech alav shakol. Then it's going to be shakol. Ve'acharav borei nefashot, and afterwards we do borei nefashot. So here we don't bless on this borei min hamazonot, right? That's very interesting. So in the Beit Yosef, we said the reason is because it's not really coming to satiate you, something like this, which is the implication of mezonot, right? Something which nourishes and satiates. Okay. Maybe we can try one more for the road. Oh my God. One more for the road. So it says over here in the Torah, Haochel orez be'en ba'ain techila, right? This is also an important one. What about if you eat rice, right? So if you're eating it like raw, it's not really cooked. So what's the blessing? Bore Priyadama. Or right, if you're eating if you're eating it whole, um, so there's like several foods that are made like with this kind of thing. For instance, like Rice Krispies, right? The cereal. So according to this, right, it's going to be Bore Priyadama. Why? Because even though it's roasted, but it's whole and it's not boiled. It's like so. Therefore, the blessing is going to be Adama. That's one way to eat it, right? But if he says if he but if he cooked it, right, boiled it in water, right, or he ground it up and made some bread with it. Oh, right, there is such a thing, like right, rice bread. Good luck with that one. Don't bring it to me. You eat it yourself. Okay. So anyway, right, what's the blessing on that? It's gonna be mezonot. So says Bet Yosef regarding that. That's why, when we eat rice, boiled rice, we make mezonot on that. But also, there's if you guys know about you remember I don't know people used to eat a lot this stuff. You know the rice cakes that stuff people eat. So those are also hadama because they're not boiled, even though they're roasted. So rice cakes are hadama. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so it says Bet Yosef here brings a source for this. Uh, Also, brachot Lamed Vav Amud Bet. Rav Shmuel De'amar Tarvayu. Rav and Shmuel both say, "Kol shehu mechameshet minim, whatever is from 5 grains, mevarech alav borei minim mezonot." It's going to be mezonot. Tepuke orders, right? So it says it's coming to exclude rice, but duchan, right, and millet. But dafilu ite be'ene, that even if it's in the original form, nami lo mevarchinan borei minim mezonot. We don't bless mezonot on that. V'otvinan alayu. So they objected against that. Tanya, because it says in the Braita, "Hakoset ha'orez mevarech borei pi adama." It says, right, if you chew rice, in other words, you eat it as a snack or whatever, it's borei pi adama. Right? Tachanu afal b'shlo. But what about if he ground it up, right, or he baked it, or he no, sorry, he ground it up and baked it, right, or he cooked it. Afal pi she prusot kaimot b'tchila. So he says, even though the slices are still existing there, whatever extent. בתחילה מברך בורא בני מזונות. So the beginning is going to be בורא מזונות, בסוף ברכה אחת מעין שלוש. And the end is going to be right, על המחיה. Ah, oh, okay, that's very interesting. But we don't paskin like that. We'll see. Anyway, והסיקנה בטיובתא, so it concludes over there, right? וההי ברייתא דקתניא בסוף ברכה אחת מעין שלוש. And that ברייתא which says that you bless on that, right? Al Mechia, right? Rame Gemara B'Tanya. We don't accept that. Why? Because the Gemara objects. L'sof v'lo klum, right? It says you don't bless nothing afterwards. Meshane Tanya B'Hai B'Raita. So it answers, right, that it's taught in that Braita Nami L'Basof Eno Mevarech Alav v'lo klum. It also says that you don't bless nothing. Piresh Rashi says v'lo klum. Klomar en ta'un b'michat b'pirot haaretz. So Rashi explains, right? It doesn't mean you don't bless anything. It means that you don't do right the ala michya or whatever, right? V'lo klum ela borei nefashot. You do borei nefashot. He says that's a pshat. B'kochol midet mishiva minim, right? Just like anything which is not from the 7 species. Yeah, of course, makes sense. That's what we do, by the way. When we bless mezonot on rice, cooked rice, we don't make ala michya when we finish, right? We say borei nefashot. So this is like the right the people who want to eat like a meal right without birkat hamazon. That's what they do, right? They have rice and rice and some main dish, right? So that's gonna be very simple, right? You just bless. You don't have to wash your hands. Right? You just bless mezonot before, and then afterwards burn the fashot, right? So you got a freebie there, Not really doing much blessing there. That's like a fast meal, It's right. What do you call it? It's a quickie. Right? Okay, fast food. Okay, whatever you want to call it. Also, when on Sukkot, right? You can eat that outside the sukkah as well. That's a good way, to make to make excuses with rice and some main dish, right? You can have a pretty decent meal without having any bread or whatever. Okay, not that I recommend skipping on the bread. I don't recommend that, but anyway, sometimes you need that, right? Whatever. So it's all good. So anyway, so he says, why don't we bless alamichi on the rice? He says, because it's not one of the seven species. That's the thing. So it's born nefashot. That blessing alamichi is only reserved, right, for the seven species. That's all. That's all. All the other stuff doesn't get that. V'chen katvu arif rosh. That's what different Roshas also said. Wherever it says, right, don't bless anything in the end, it means that what? It means you do born nefashot. It doesn't mean you get scot free. You don't get off scot free. No, you gotta bless something. Born nefashot. It's very short. Takes 3 seconds. What is it? Okay, 5 seconds maybe. Oh, anyway, right. So you get the point. וגם הרמב"ם כתב בפרק ג' מברך אחריו בורא נפשות רבות. He also says Rambam, right? Afterwards, it's going to be born nefashot. So that's the halakha, right? That we don't do ala mechia for rice. The way it is. Okay, there's still a lot more here, so I guess we'll continue next time. B'ezras Hashem. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila tov, chazak u'baruch, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
All the best.